Good to be back.
Good to be back.
Today we have Rule 11. Rule 11 from the 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. And Rule
Correct.
11, Rule 11 is do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
That's
Do
correct.
not bother children when they are skateboarding. What does Peterson mean by that?
I think that what he means is that if you see your children doing something dangerous, but they're doing it carefully, don't stop them. Let them continue. Let them continue. They're doing something that's potentially dangerous, but they're doing it carefully. Let them continue. Now, by that, he doesn't mean, hey, look, if it's a life-threatening thing or something that, they're walking near the edge of a huge, you have to stop that. However, you know, like for example, I remember playing on the monkey bars when I got here from Cuba, and then all of a sudden the monkey bars were gone. And right here in California. So somebody got hurt, some attorney sued,
They maybe changed
and they changed the
they
regulations and the monkey bars were gone.
they changed the monkey bars. I
They
had
changed
monkey
them,
bars
huh?
growing up. They didn't get
Well,
rid of them.
the park that I used to go to,
Oh, okay.
first they put a padding on the floor, so it used to be sand, and then they put a thick padding so if people would fall down, it wouldn't be. And then later on, the monkey bars were gone, you know,
Hmm.
and kids would fall and get hurt all the time. I fell and got hurt,
Yeah.
I never sued nobody, but somebody did, and that changed the laws and regulations. And he talks about that,
Yeah.
that kids, boys specifically, they want to do dangerous things sometimes,
Yeah.
and it's not specific to boys. It's not just that some girls want to do it too, but he differentiates. He talks about that. What is it that he says? Boys are more interested in things, and girls are more interested in
People.
people.
Yeah.
And he says, that's innate.
Yeah.
That's intrinsic. It's not something that's, you know,
Yeah. And he opens up with the example of the kids skateboarding in Canada that
right,
he would observe. And he says, this was a quote I thought was interesting. He says, it was dangerous, but they weren't trying to be safe. They were trying to be competent.
right.
That's why you want to let them do that activity in this case skateboarding without bothering them or stopping them. um they were trying to become perfect the move that they needed to move on the skateboard.
Yeah, and he also says sometimes they did it good and sometimes they fell off the skateboard and it was not so good.
Right.
But that's the risks, right?
Yeah.
And he
That
said mostly were boys, right?
yeah.
Right.
In that example. And when you become competent at something, when you become good at something, I think that ties into also like your character and your self-esteem, because you can accomplish things and people now, you feel good about that, and people maybe are telling you, hey, that's cool, you can do that move, but it all comes from the practice. But if a parent, and that's why I asked you, because you have more experience in this sense, but if you stop your kid from doing something that is potentially dangerous, you know you could also be stopping them from becoming competent at it, stop them from maybe building self-esteem and confidence.
That's it. Confidence. They gain confidence, and with that, they seem to be able to thrive.
Yeah.
Self-esteem, confidence, because they feel good about being able to perfect, let's say, that move.
Yeah.
Like, for example, on social media, I see these kids that are riding their bicycles down these ramps. And then they come up and they get off the bike in the air and roll the bike. And then just before they're going to land, they sit right back on the bike, barely making it, right?
Yeah.
But they've got it down to a science. Um, I wouldn't get caught dead doing that. It's not my field of expertise. But these guys have fallen 1,000 times, maybe broken 100 bones, but they've perfected that, and they're daredevils kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you'll find that those guys, whatever they do in life, they're gonna go 150%. It's not gonna get stuck. You're not gonna be able to stop those guys
Mm.
if they get something in their mind. That's why being an athlete is so important, because the discipline that you need to exert to become really, really good at playing basketball, playing golf, playing football, playing soccer, football, soccer, um, uh, that discipline runs over into everything else that you do,
Yeah.
whether it's becoming a businessman, becoming a surgeon, becoming an engineer, becoming an architect. It is sort of like a training that you go through that, like you said, makes you the person that you are, man or woman, builds your character.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Now, was it hard, let's say, because you let us, we played outside a lot
Yeah.
growing up and stuff, and you guys would let us do things, but obviously, like, okay, you got to put a helmet on or whatever, right? If you're riding a bike. So there's certain things too that you don't go maybe to the extreme of letting them do something that they can really, really get hurt bad, like you said, right? You're walking next to a cliff or something.
Right.
But how do you know when, how do you know? Because there are some people that are just fearful of everything,
Right.
you know, of
Well,
every corner in the house, of every, the kid can get hurt in so many ways. And kids seem to be almost to a certain extent like rubber, they fall down and they get back up and they're okay many times.
yeah. Well, Mike, my philosophy has changed as I've gotten older. Okay. Um, many times I talk to young couples sometimes that were involved with business or whatever, because I'm not a psychologist. I don't see people, and what do I know, right, about anything? But I see young couples that, for example, let's say you have a young couple and they have their first baby, a little boy or a little girl, and that baby just goes, eh, and that couple is all over them, especially the mom. That's bad. That's, I don't think, is necessarily good, you know? And there's a portion there that he says, the overprotective mother smothers the baby and does not allow the baby to develop into the person that he could potentially be.
Right.
Um, anything, so for example, you have a young couple that has a baby, they are extremely overprotective with that baby. And what
Right.
he says is anything that shelters too much destroys the development and the confidence of that developing baby.
Yeah, it goes hand with rule 5 also, which is do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And I remember he brought that up about the overprotective mother, the helicopter mom,
Yeah,
you know. Um,
it's horrible, because they're not aware that they're doing it. It's just innate. And
yeah,
it's a very difficult situation because as a mother, you want to protect the child.
right.
But man, if that, for example, let's take an example. What is the difference between a couple that has a baby, first time baby, right? And that baby sleeping throughout the night by the time the baby is 3 months old? Because that happens. 4 months old, the baby's sleeping through the night. As opposed to the couple that has the first baby, and that baby, it's not sleeping through the night. It's waking up every 2 hours. And, the baby is 8 months old,
I don't
nine
know what
months
I don't know what
old.
the difference is. It seems like some people try to do like sleep training and things like that. And that basically tries to put the kid on some sort of track where they maybe have a routine or something like that. And then also, it seems like every kid is different. That sleep training can work with some kids and maybe not with others.
I
That's from
disagree.
the
I
little
disagree.
experience that I
I
had.
disagree. I think you can get a child. I think that you are training the child to wake up every 2 hours. or wake up every 3 hours. You're
Maybe,
actually training the child to do that because the
maybe,
child is
maybe,
training you.
maybe. Yeah,
Because he wakes up, or she, and he's hungry, or she is, and she starts screaming. And if you feed him, well, then he knows that he can wake up in the middle of the night, cry, and get food. So
maybe.
you're training the baby to look, I don't know anything. You're
No, no,
welcome
no.
to,
But
to disagree
it's your
with me
opinion on it.
because
Yeah,
all I'm doing is interpreting the law.
the rule.
Excuse me.
But he really doesn't get into babies and all that. What he gets into is the overprotective mother that he gives the story of like the Hansel and Gretel, where it and I had never heard of this, so I had to look it up. It's called a Oedipal Oedipal mother. Um, he gets into babies in the other chapter where you put sit the baby down and all that, but that's rule uh 5. Let me just make sure I have it here. Yeah, don't let your children, because remember he was visiting a friend. No, I'm sorry. Uh, yeah, his they were visiting at a friend's house, and the kid was like didn't want to sleep, and he would get up, and then Peterson says that he would sit the kid down. That's a different chapter. This one he's talking about the overprotective mother that does it to the point where they want the kid all for themselves.
That's right. And
And
it says it smothers and devours.
correct. And he gave the Hansel and Gretel example.
Okay.
And what the Oedipal, when I looked it up,
The Oedipal mother.
um, the Oedipus complex. So it was a Sigmund Freud, the psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
and it says that the Oedipal mother is the mother that gets too close to her children and intermingles herself with them to a great degree. Medium.com. The story of the devouring mother.
Right.
And so,
She doesn't want to lose that baby.
right,
And she doesn't even want that baby to
it's
get
not a
married.
baby. Well, it could be a baby, but in Hansel and Gretel, it's they're little kids.
But
But eventually they grow up.
and she doesn't want them to marry. She wants them to
Right.
stay home. And
Correct.
he says that there's even more psychological meanings into some of the actions that are taken into account. For example,
Yeah.
this, and I don't know if I'm mixing, I'm probably mixing, and thereby my ignorance to the entire subject. Let me tell you, this rule
Hmm.
was very tough for me.
Yeah. This one was
I
probably
mean,
the hardest for me as
for
well.
me is the hardest, and I have said this about the previous rules because this
Yeah.
guy goes into depth, and I'm trying to figure him out and interpret it
Yeah.
based on my experiences. So my interpretation could be, you know, completely different from somebody, or it will be, and there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
But for example, he says, well, when the mother over protects the baby,
Hmm.
let's say the baby wakes up in the middle of the night, and now this particular baby is able to walk. And the baby walks to the mom and dad's room and gets into the bed,
Yeah.
and
The toddler or whatever.
a toddler, and they allow them to sleep there with him.
Right.
He says that a hidden meaning could potentially be that the mother doesn't really want to have any relations with the husband, but
Hmm.
this is an excuse to allow this to happen.
Hmm.
And so, he just goes very deep. I mean,
Yeah.
deeper than um, I'm not qualified. You see what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
he's something else.
It's
Uh,
covering a lot in this chapter. But I try to bring it back to real life and like personal experiences. But the Hansel and Gretel story, just to finish it, it's a
yeah.
mom that tells her husband to take the kids out to the forest because they were, I guess, eating too much and this and that. So the mom has them sent away. The father takes them to the forest and basically leaves them there. They find these kids, Hansel and Gretel, find a witch in the middle of the forest that begins to feed them, and she's like super nurturing, I guess. I
Hmm.
haven't read the story, but the way Peterson sums it up is that she gives them a ton of food until they realize that she's gonna eat them. So it gets to the she was the devouring mother in the example. That's what Peterson says that the witch was the devouring mother that gave them everything that they wanted, all the food and cared for them and nurturing. But it was because she was going to end up literally eating them. It's kind of a scary story,
It's a very scary story.
but that's the story of Hansel and Gretel. And then he gave a lot of other examples in Disney movies where you have that the mother figure, the Cruella de Vil in 101 Dalmatians,
Right.
Ursula
Yeah.
in The Little Mermaid,
Right.
uh, Maleficent in, I think, Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah.
Anyways, so these characters are out there, and they're out there in real life too. And we know of a family member, distant family member, that the mother she had two daughters that were twins, and
Hmm.
every time that the mother they wanted to go out or date somebody, the mother would say that they weren't good enough.
Right. And not
That
that distant family member.
yeah, and it got to the point where the mom turned away every single potential suitor.
Right.
And so these two sisters, twins, they were twins?
They were twins.
Yeah. Ended up
Never married.
never marrying. They lived together for the rest of their
And
life.
they took care of their mom until the mom passed away.
Yeah.
So the mother is that monster
Well,
that never
I
allowed. No, no, listen. At some point, you got to let go. 'Cause people have to live their lives.
yeah.
People have to live their lives.
So let's say that she did it with the intention of actually protecting her daughters because she felt there was no man good enough for their daughters, for her daughters.
Right. Well,
That so it came from, like, let's say, that good place, but it became
as she got
a
older
negative
and
thing.
frail, she realized if they marry, they're going to go. What's going to happen to me? And that's a very selfish type of thing. And it
Yeah.
could have been you're giving her the benefit of the doubt, and God bless you for it.
Yeah.
And who am I to judge, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I mean, I was a kid and I never paid attention to any of that stuff happening around in the family until I became older. But the word got around that, hey, she turned every suitor away, they never married, and as you know they she got older and they got older, they became her daycare givers, and they took care of her until she died.
Mm-hmm.
So she assured herself of two people to take care of her at the cost of their, and you don't know if they could have married somebody and be very, very unhappy, but
Or
they didn't develop their life
yeah.
in a different direction because their mother was the attention at all times.
Yes. And in this rule, one of the quotes from the book is assume ignorance before malevolence. We don't know if the mom was actually evil in that sense then,
Right.
right? Hopefully not. But um before you go assuming that the other person, like, let's say I'm having an issue with somebody, before I go thinking that they did that to me on purpose, Peterson's saying assume ignorance first.
Okay.
Talk to the person, try and figure out the situation before you jump to, hey, they did that on purpose. Um, he gets into the need. He he go, he jumps from
I mean,
this
it's brutal.
Oedipal mother to um, the difference in aggressiveness between boys and girls. One of the things he brought up was that you don't have to teach aggressiveness, that the kid is born with it. And I've heard different people talk about, you stick a kid with a ton of energy, let's say a boy, into a classroom to sit 6 hours a day or whatever it is, and he's got a lot of energy. It's not gonna work. They're gonna look for some sort of outlet, whether it's becoming a class clown and this and that, and it could be problematic. Peterson doesn't get into that in this rule, but I thought that was interesting. Um,
I mean, he talks. I mean, this rule is
he says the
we
husband's role.
cannot do justice to this rule
Hmm.
in a 1 hour podcast.
No, no, you.
And our podcasts are less than an hour, but
Yeah,
you just can't cover. I mean, you got to read the book, folks. You
W-
have to read the book and
I
then
agree. I agree.
go through your own hurdles on it because I had a ton of them. It just doesn't do it justice. One,
The
go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, one thing that I found interesting, and I'm jumping all over the place
Well,
here.
yeah, we're just
I
kind of
mean, we're just giving our
giving
opinion,
our.
but I found very interesting the study that has been done on identical twins
Hmm.
that have been, for one reason or another, separated at birth. Okay, and they end up being, in the example that he cites, very much different,
Hmm.
and yet retain tremendous aspects of being somewhat the same. Case in point is these identical twins that were separated at birth for whatever reason, and one of them ended up with a family that was poorer than the average family,
Hmm.
and the other one ended up with a family that was richer than the average family. And the guy that ended up with the family that was richer was smarter by 15 percentage points than the guy that ended up with the family that was poor. And he's citing
His IQ.
his IQ, he's citing wealth. Is that something that can be extrapolate it from that and say, okay, well, what was the difference there? Well, wealth was the difference because these guys were wealthy and these guys were not.
Yeah.
Was there more opportunity because he was wealthy?
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
You can argue that all day long. In this particular example, the one kid with the wealthy family was 15 percentage points in IQ higher than the other guy.
Yeah.
And he says, Jordan Peterson, that that's the equivalent of taking a high school kid and comparing him to a college kid. That's the difference.
Hmm.
I found it very interesting because they're just looking at one little thing, which potentially is wealth. Okay.
Right. Yeah, he called it culture, which
What
is
what
basically.
else is there that can be measured that provides a huge difference?
Hmm.
Because I know people that have been born into families where they have tremendous opportunities and they don't use them. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
the wealthiest of families and they just don't use it. We're preview to a family that we know that were extremely wealthy, but yet by the time the grandkids are up, they're just average people in terms of wealth. Okay, they lost it all, or they didn't have a keen eye for developing that or whatever the case. So you just it's
Yeah, that's an
tremendous.
interesting study. Um, Also, he brings up in this chapter, and I think this is where it gets somewhat controversial. Also, is talking about the roles of the man in the household, the woman in the household, and he said the man is there to take care of the wife and the child, to provide for.
Right.
The mother is there to the wife is there to take care of the husband and the child, not to care for, but not to have a husband as a child.
Right.
And so, because then you're taking care of two children in that scenario. And so, the woman he brings up wants a partner that is smarter, more educated,
Strong.
stronger, more capable in many, many ways. That's what they're looking for. So he says when you have a woman that is extremely smart and extremely
Successful.
successful, it's very difficult for them to find a partner
Right.
because.
And vice versa.
What do you mean?
I had a
Oh, you're
guy.
saying with a man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he gave specific, but he says that's more common.
Right.
The wealthy man is okay with a woman that's
Marrying
not
down.
as smart, let's say.
Yeah. The
But
wealthy
the
man is okay marrying down. Right. That's what he said.
yes, and the
but not
uh
the wealthy woman.
and it wasn't wealth only, it was
Right.
smarts.
Smarts
Yeah,
and
the smart
right.
man that also has higher education, all these things, is okay marrying down uh to somebody
It's
that,
very
let's say, doesn't.
controversial, man.
Yeah, it's very controversial. He's saying that the woman, though, it's less likely, she's more likely, unless she's like that Oedipus mother type of person where she wants somebody that she can basically just control, childlike kind of thing. But most successful women, smart, educated, they want somebody who can challenge them, that they can grapple with, is what he, those were the words he used. I've seen it. It makes sense. I've seen couples that the woman seems to be sharper, more educated, smarter, and so they find somebody that isn't at that level and they'll dump them eventually. And I've seen the other way, because I think people need some sort of challenge. And if you have somebody that's just like a yes man or a yes woman situation without any sort of challenge and grappling, I think that can get old pretty quickly, just from my perspective.
Yeah.
And um, so we're seeking somebody that can challenge us. I thought that was interesting. Um, Another thing that he brought up was um, being too compassionate, and he even said that there was like a form of training that he says women have seem to have this problem more, but it happens with men too, but with women that are not aggressive enough, and then they allow for somebody, they're extremely compassionate, and then it turns into they people begin to take advantage of them.
And then there's resentment that comes in.
Right. And
So
that is
he t-
important. He brought up a lot of importance on that
so he
resentment.
the one in where too compassionate, he says that usually agreeable people, too much agreeable people, okay, um, vis-a-vis, let's say, compassionate people, end up having other people taking advantage of them, and then there's resentment that comes about.
Right.
And so, you know, I see it in my grandkids. My grandkids, because he says kids naturally will kick, fight, and bite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, and this is where I'm telling you that I have changed over the years, because in the old days, if I saw any disagreement or whatever, I would filter in right away and try to resolve it according to my thoughts. But now, when I see them, and they're all little, right? When I see them fighting or whatever, I, I let them go at it. I let them be, because I think that they have their own politics. Now, if one of them is overwhelmingly uh, overpowering the other one by force or something, then of course I step
You
in.
step in, yeah.
Okay, I don't
But
let
you
that
try to let them resolve it.
resolve it amongst themselves. I think
Yeah.
this is the best policy. And what do I know about anything? Not much. But that's my way of dealing with it, because in the old days I used to, when with you guys,
Mm-hmm.
when you guys were little, I would mediate a lot of stuff. And now I'm looking back and thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And now with them, with the
But
grandkids, I just let them go at it.
yeah.
I'm not gonna let somebody get a pencil and poke somebody in the eye with it. Okay, that's not going to happen.
Well, the thing is that
But when they're pulling each other, and and it's mine, and all this stuff,
there's no manual. So you
right?
you now with experience maybe would have done things a little different with, let's say, me and your kids.
No doubt about it.
But when you become a parent at first, you know, you don't know anything.
There's no operating manual.
um, you
But the
know,
tendency, if I read him right,
mm-hmm,
goes with the overprotective mother and father, which create a little monster.
right.
And I see it. I see it all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
The kid can't say, and then, the parents are all over them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good. I remember my high school teacher saying that the worst thing, and I went to an all boys high school,
Uh-huh.
and there was a mom that was he called her a helicopter mom.
Okay.
So if the kid did bad in class, this is high school, the kid did bad in school or class or something, she was blaming the teacher. She was like all over. And I think it's good to be involved in your kids' education and what's going on. But this was another extreme. And it was very easy to blame the teacher instead of actually addressing the kid's problem.
Which potentially stem from the household
Right.
at home.
And that Arable mother will always make her kid the victim.
Right. That's a problem.
So no matter what life throws at you or your kid in this situation, it wasn't their fault. Somebody bullied them. Somebody did this to them. Some society did this, right? I remember, and he brought up an example of when you have men playing, let's say playing against women or something, boys playing against girls, it'll never be an even matchup because the men are going to be less aggressive. And I remember in AYSO soccer playing, just scrimmaging, practicing against the girls' team. And we were the boys' team. These girls were slide tackling, pushing us, pulling us. They knew that they could get away with more, and they were more aggressive than the guys were. And I remember thinking, man, like they were also very good,
Right.
but they
But they were more aggressive and you guys were holding back.
and we couldn't be you could we couldn't how are you going to slide tackle a girl,
Okay. Well,
you
I
know?
got news for you.
But I
Like I,
saw it in real life.
right,
I got slide tackled by a girl and I thought, Jesus, like we're just practicing here.
right. No, but it was more than a practice for them. They were trying to make a point that they were better than you guys and they could beat you guys. But you guys were not playing at your best.
We couldn't play at the highest level
Why not?
because you had to go easy on the girls,
Why?
because you're a kid and you can't. The
No,
last
but
thing
was
you
that a rule that was set forth before the game started?
I think it was a I don't know if the coach said it, I don't remember, but
Okay.
it was kind of a known thing. You can't.
Right.
And that's one
Well,
thing
Peterson, I think, says that's a problem.
he does. Peterson said when a girl beats a boy at something,
He's dead. He's
he's
done.
he's done. A girl beat you, you got
You're
beat by a
done.
girl, right?
You're done. And
If you beat a
psychologically,
girl at something, you're not necessarily seen as the victor,
no.
not
So you
necessarily.
lose no matter what.
So he brought that example. It's interesting because I just think of like playground and as a kid, yeah, yeah, you couldn't have the same level of aggression that you would if you were playing against all boys.
Well, like I say, I'm on social media way too much for my own good. There is a clip, it's a short clip, where I think it's an army, uh, uh, what do you call it? It's either army or navy or something like this, and they have this boxing match. Okay, and there was this lady, and she's tough. This lady was tough. She could take me any day of the week and twice on Sunday, no doubt about it. She was a tough lady, but she issued a not a warning, but a challenge
Mm,
that she could take any man in the audience. And this is an army barrack, and there was they had a boxing ring, and she says, I can take any one of you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure there were guys that were afraid to go up to her because she was one tough lady. Okay. But one guy said, okay, I'm up for the challenge. Okay. And she came out punching bullets, but he hit her as hard as he could. And the fight was over quite quickly. He knocked her out.
whoa.
And the first punch, she got up and she was really upset, and you could tell that she meant to kill. And then he punched her again, and there was no match because he was a strong guy, very strong woman, and he took her out.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, there was no holding back on that one. He was determined to prove that, okay, you are very strong and I commend you for that, but you're not going to take every guy. And that's the difference in the genders that he comes up with, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why he's saying that a woman is looking for a man that's strong, that can protect the family,
Hmm.
that can provide for the family, and at least as an equal, not somebody that she's gonna get married to and have another child to take care of.
Right.
And so, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
he's he's got a lot of controversial issues here, you know, a lot of them. And he goes into the wars. He talks
Yeah.
about Stalin, Lenin, you know,
Yeah.
it's extreme.
Yeah. It jumps around a lot. When I read the rule, the just the title of the rule, I thought this was gonna have to do with just kids and like letting them grow and learn and kind of being a little more hands off. But no, he takes it to even forms of government, and that the wealth is not distributed equally. He goes in all of that into this chapter, and he's saying, look, it's an experiment what we're doing, capitalism and these different forms of government, but he says we don't necessarily know what to replace it with that would be better.
Right. He's saying, look, I'll grant you that capitalism is not the best system, but it's a better system than the others because the others killed millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
And he brings proof to the table. Like he says, the overprotective mother won't even let her kid tie her shoes or his shoes. Too much protection devastates the developing soul.
Yeah. Wow.
When you listen to, you listen to some of the stuff, you want, let the kid do,
Yeah.
unless it's something dangerous to the kid, leave him be or her.
Yeah.
Let him cry a little bit. It's good for the lungs, develop the lungs.
Yeah.
If the kid just goes and you're all over the kid, I mean, she won't let him tie his shoes. Too much protection devastates the developing soul. I mean, you gotta be.
But it makes sense.
It,
It makes sense that at a certain point, and initially, like when a baby is a newborn, y- it's making sure the baby's okay and all the time and this and that. But once they develop and become a little stronger, they, I think, need to have some that independence.
yeah, it's I like the identical twin stuff. He says there are
Yeah.
studies on that. I love to check into that. He says aggression is not merely learned; it's innate, just like you said it.
Another thing he brought up was the working out on the was it the railway or
Oh
something like
yeah,
that out in Canada? And
actually in England.
no,
Okay, what are you talking about?
the railway, that when he had a job as a
Okay,
as a
okay,
young
that's
guy.
different. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and he he was saying that they picked on each other to kind of test you.
Right, right.
And I think of, like, I have a good buddy that's in construction, and what he does with the new employees is he gives them the hardest job possible at first and see how they handle it
That's interesting.
and see if they can break you in the first 2 weeks. If you can get through that, then you're going to be, seems like a good worker.
It sounds like Hell Week.
Yeah. Yeah, in football. Um, but I also remember playing, because I played soccer all 4 years in high school, and I also remember there was a lot of picking on, you know, bullying, this and that. Now you hear about bullying. I personally don't remember the level of bullying that seems to be portrayed in the media nowadays and in some places, but you always made fun of each other. Now you were in an all boys school, high school, and so high school, you know, they make fun of everything.
Yeah, he's
You know,
calling it like
if you had
the
a yeah,
nickname theory.
that's the thing. I have nicknames still from high school One kid was Peaches, another kid was Gumby, another kid, we,
Nose.
yeah, what they would make fun of you and whatever how you looked. But it was also a way of testing you. Can you laugh at a joke? Do
Can
you
you
take yourself too seriously? And I thought that was interesting that Peterson brought that up. It was all boys, and in his situation, it was all men. And he brought up in the rule that it's mostly men that are doing these extremely physical jobs. The cook in the back of the kitchen, the guy laying the railway, putting up the roofs, the hard
work in the
labor.
sewers
Yeah.
with all the cockroaches coming at you? There's a guy that's working the sewers and he's full of
Oof.
cockroaches. I want to see a lady do that, right?
Maybe
It's
maybe there are ladies that do
maybe
it, but what he brought up was it's mostly men.
right.
It's not that the woman is not capable of
No,
it.
they're capable.
It's that it's mostly men that are doing that for X or Y reason,
The bricklayer theory
and he brings up that boys are more interested in things and girls are more interested in
in
people,
people.
educators, um what's the teachers,
Hmm.
nurses, taking care of people and different, so it's interesting. Then you have outliers, of course. You have women that are in different fields. And like I remember, I knew this one girl that was studying to be, I think, a civil engineer. And I think she said she was the only girl in the whole class of,
Mm.
students in college of civil engineering. So it's interesting.
It it
But
really is. He's talking to a certain extent about equality, right? And so he's saying, well, he's saying, look, when you talk about equality, what he says is, let's get a lady to make as much money as men, okay? Right? That's the theory that women are making less money than men. Well, why? They're not necessarily not as smart. In fact, many of them are smarter, right? So, or equally smart. So, why are they making less money? So, let's bring equality into the picture. Then he says, well, wait a minute. Let's get someone of that, it's a black lady now making as much money as a white lady. Is the white lady making more money than a black lady? And then he says, what about Indians? Let's talk about the Indians. Should all the Indian tribes be making the same money? Because there's some tribes of Indians that are making more money than other tribes of Indian. Are they less equal? And then he says, well, what about disabled people? Let's pay disabled people as much as people that are not disabled. But then let's define here, what does disabled mean? So it gets so complex and complicated.
yeah, it's very
It
complicated.
made my mind
It's very
roll
complicated.
because he says, well, wait a minute, define normal to me. Or let's do it better. Why don't you define disabled to me? Is disabled someone that's taking care of their parents 24 hours a day and they're disabled because they can't develop their lives? Or is disabled someone that's overweight or someone that's physically disabled or mentally disabled? Is a disabled person someone because it's just they're less attractive, so they're disabled?
Yeah.
What does disabled mean? Define disability for me. And it went beyond, let's say, what you might think normally about physical disability,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so it gets complicated the way he puts it and breaks it down to like the atom, let's say.
Yeah.
And
I think if we can,
I don't
that
have the
it's
answer, and I don't know what the answer is.
it's a very interesting point.
It's
And then he goes into like the amount of hours actually worked and time off. We have to take all of those things into account when looking at pay.
correct.
But to sum it up, I think that
You got to read the rule, gentlemen and ladies. It's
I
complicated.
yeah, and I think to kind of sum it up in this chapter in this rule, which is don't stop. Hold on a second. Let me make sure I got it. Don't stop believing. Don't do not bother children when they are skateboarding. I think to sum it up, what he means, just from my interpretation, is that you have to allow kids, children, to test boundaries and allow them to maybe fall, get hurt, get back up, build their confidence in things, um, and not be so protective of your children. But eventually, it turns into like society and men and women and our roles in life. Like, you have to let people test boundaries, and that's kind of what I get out of it. That's kind of what I like. The gist of it is because it's all over the place. This was really very difficult for me to follow as
Oh,
well.
I had,
But that's kind of what I get out of it. What? How about you? What's your
well,
kind of
you
takeaway?
reminded me of that old sitcom where the grandpa is taking care of the kid, and the kid comes and he's gonna put something in the electrical socket.
Yeah.
And the grandma goes, "Oh, no, no, dear." And he goes, "No, wait, wait, wait." The grandpa says, "Go ahead, go ahead." And then the kid puts whatever in the electrical socket, and you hear, "Bzzz." And the grandpa says, "Uh huh. I bet you won't do that again, huh?" You know, it reminds me of that. And I don't know that I would go that far.
Yeah.
I don't want the kid to get electrocuted, right? But that's an old, it's a satire, right? Of
Yeah.
the way it used to be to
Tough love.
the.
It's tough love.
um, Yeah, you know, this was very complicated for me. It doesn't make the rule, it doesn't give the rule justice just to devote just this little time for it. I was all over the place. This is the one that I've given most hours to. And I thought, you know, they have increasingly taken more of my time. This
Yeah.
is a very deep thing. But the one thing that I want to end with,
Yeah.
which was a very scary thought, that at the very end he says, if you think that tough men are dangerous, wait till you see what weak men are capable of. Now, think that for a second, okay? If you think that tough men are dangerous, wait till you see what weak men are capable of.
Wow.
Um, that, you know, when I read it, I put everything on pause and I thought about that, and I'm telling you, it's brutal. It's very, very interesting.
How do you interpret that
I
right there?
think I think that he's got a portion in there where we didn't get to it. Um, um,
The weak men for the way that I take that is they're the ones that are doing the school shootings. They're the ones that are taking their lives, taking other people's lives. Those are what I think he means by when he says that weak men are more dangerous.
well, he says that in our society there's a tendency, and folks, I'm paraphrasing. I hope I don't get things right. I mean, wrong, but you know, who knows? Boys turning into girls, you know, like socializing boys to act like girls. He doesn't believe that that is correct. We should let boys be boys and girls be girls. You know, to get boys to be less aggressive
Yeah.
as a socialization type of thing. You know, he says aggression is not learned. Aggression is innate. And so when he
Yeah.
said that, it brings to mind that um, you know, that saying that strong men create good times create
Weak men.
weak men, and weak men create tough times, and then the cycle begins again. Tough times create strong men. You know, yeah,
Yeah.
I think the weaker men in character, in spirit, in their soul, are capable of doing potentially far more harm than strong men. He says the weakening of the male is bad for everybody. It's bad for women too. This is not something that's good for everybody.
Yeah.
Now he's got the degrees and he's got studies, and he's got the experience with his practice and all of that. So I guess he has a good platform to stand on and say this, right? And he backs it up with historical data on Lenin, Mao, Vietnam, all these things that have caused uh,
Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, the Soviet Union with the Gulag uh, situation. So, he cites a lot of historical information
Right.
that he says, look, this is what happens. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a
this,
good way to
oh
close.
my God, this was,
Heavy.
I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, this one was heavy. Well, we have one rule left.
One rule left.
That'll be next week.
That'll be next week.
But thank you everybody for listening,
Thank you. Thank you.
and we'll see you on the next
All
one.
right. I hope it's helpful.
Thanks.